Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, no subtitles, English listening practice topic name is Daily Listening Habit Builder.
It's great to be here. And, we're tackling a subject today that feels incredibly urgent. It's almost like we're discussing a lost art.
A lost art, you mean, or just listening?
I do. Seriously, think about it. When you're out in the world, on a train, in a coffee shop, what's the one thing everyone is doing?
Oh, that's easy. They're on their phones. Heads down, scrolling. It's all scanning.
Scanning. That's the perfect word for it. We've become a species of professional scanners and skimmers. We swipe through images, we double tap, we multitask.
Right.
But deep, intentional listening, the kind where you let an idea unfold at its own pace for, say, 20 minutes, that feels almost like an endangered activity.
It really does. It's like the difference between skipping a stone across a lake and actually putting on the gear and diving in. And that's what we're getting into today, isn't it? That listening isn't just background noise.
Not at all.
It's a transformative daily practice.
It is. The core idea here is that listening is a tool. It sharpens your mind in a way that just watching something can't, and it deepens your relationships in a way a text message never could. But to get why we need it, we have to look at the world we're in.
And that brings us to this crisis of attention.
That's the term, yeah. We are living in what they call an attention economy.
I hear that phrase all the time. Let's break that down. It sounds like my focus has become a commodity.
It's a currency. And right now, every app, every website, every advertiser is in a war to get a piece of it. And, they're winning. We found this one stat that's just staggering. The average person checks their phone over 150 times a day.
150. Wow. If you do the math on that, for someone awake 16 hours, that's what, nearly every 6 minutes?
Every 6 minutes. Imagine trying to read a challenging book or have a meaningful conversation. If I tapped you on the shoulder every 6 minutes to show you a cat video.
I'd get nothing done, and I'd probably get very annoyed.
But that's how we're living. And the real consequence isn't just being distracted. It's that our brains are actually changing. Our ability to just stick with something is getting weaker.
That's the critical point, isn't it? It's not just a bad habit. It's changing our capacity for sustained attention.
It is. We've been conditioned for instant gratification.
Yeah.
We want the punchline in a 3-second video. We need that little dopamine hit right now. If an article is too long, we don't read it. We just skim the bullet points.
We've lost our patience for anything that doesn't deliver an immediate payoff.
We have. And this is why listening is the perfect antidote. By its very nature, it forces you to slow down. You can't skim an audiobook. You can't swipe through a podcast. You have to surrender to the pace of the speaker and let the story unfold.
So building a daily listening habit is it's like an act of rebellion. You're taking back your own mind from the attention economy.
It's a way of saying, my focus belongs to me, not to an algorithm.
I love that. Okay, so let's get into the mechanics, specifically the neuroscience, because I think a lot of people, myself included, might assume that reading a book and listening to that same book are, basically the same thing. You're getting the same words.
But your brain would strongly disagree. They are fundamentally different experiences. When you read, you're decoding symbols. It's a visual linguistic process, highly advanced but specific.
Okay.
When you listen, you're engaging a much older, more primal part of the brain. You're processing what we could call the texture of the sound.
The texture of sound. I like that. What does that mean, practically?
It means you're not just getting the dictionary definition of the words. Your brain is simultaneously processing the tone of voice, the rhythm of the speech, the emotion. You can hear a smile. You can hear a frown. You process the pauses, the hesitations. All of that is data.
Right. It's the classic example of reading the text, I'm fine, versus hearing someone say, I'm fine. The words are identical, but the meaning is the complete opposite.
That's a perfect example. And your brain has to work to decode all that extra emotional data. This lights up multiple brain regions at once. It engages the empathy centers, the mirror neuron system, in a way that plain text just can't. When you hear a quiver in someone's voice, a part of your brain mirrors that feeling.
So listening is a kind of high bandwidth connection for emotional information.
It is. And this all ties into the concept of neuroplasticity. We used to think the brain was fixed after childhood. We now know that's completely wrong. The brain changes based on what you do with it.
So a regular listening habit is like taking your brain to the gym.
It is. You're building richer, stronger neural pathways. You're enhancing what scientists call cognitive flexibility.
And what are the tangible benefits of that flexibility? If I actually commit to this, what changes in my brain over a year?
Well, the list is pretty impressive. First, improved memory retention, especially for stories and complex ideas. Our brains are wired for narrative. We also see a measurable reduction in stress hormones like cortisol, especially with certain types of listening. And as we just discussed, you're strengthening those neural pathways related to empathy. You literally get better at understanding other people.
So the core argument is you're not just downloading information. You are physically upgrading your brain's hardware to be more efficient, calmer, and more connected.
You're building a better brain one podcast at a time.
That is a massive claim. But we have to be specific here because listening is such a broad term. I think some people hear daily listening habit and they just think, having the news on in the background all day.
Which is not what we're talking about.
Right. So the material we've been looking at breaks us down into 4 very distinct types. It's like a balanced diet for your mind.
That's a great analogy. You can't just eat one food group. You need variety for mental health, just like you do for physical health.
Okay, let's go through them. The first one is the most obvious, educational listening.
This is the gym. Like you said, this is going to the gym for your mind. We're talking nonfiction audiobooks, lectures from universities, language learning programs. The goal is very clear.
Yeah.
You are trying to learn a specific thing.
This is the I want to get smarter category.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. But then we have the second type, which I think a lot of people feel a little guilty about, entertainment listening.
And they absolutely should not. Guilt has no place here. This is vital. Entertainment listening is your fiction audiobooks, your comedy podcasts, storytelling, old-time radio dramas.
The goal is just joy, escape.
Joy, escape, emotion. And it's essential. This isn't wasting time. This is the nutrient-dense food for your creativity and your emotional well-being. We need stories. We are wired to make sense of the world through narrative.
And from a brain perspective.
From a brain perspective, getting lost in a good story is a rest and digest state. It's active recovery for your mind. It lowers stress and allows for creative connections to form.
So if educational listening is the intense workout, entertainment listening is the healthy, delicious recovery meal.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. Now, the third type is fascinating because I think it's the most neglected in our modern world. Contemplative listening.
That sounds a little more abstract. What does that involve?
It can be abstract, but it's also very practical. The goal here is presence and mindfulness. This category includes things like listening to nature sounds.
Okay, like bird song or rain.
Yes. Or ambient music, certain types of chants, or, and this is the big one, intentionally listening to silence.
Listening to silence. That sounds really hard.
It is for most people. We're so used to being bombarded with noise that pure silence can feel uncomfortable, heavy even. But its function is to regulate your nervous system. It's the ultimate counterpunch to the constant overstimulation of our lives.
So it's like hitting the reset button on your brain's audio input.
It resets the baseline. It calms the static.
And the fourth type is relational listening. Now, this one's interesting because we're mostly talking about a solo habit today. How does that fit in?
That's a great question. Typically, relational listening is about listening to another human being in real time. But in the context of building this habit, it refers to content that deepens our understanding of human connection. So long-form interviews, biographies, memoirs.
Things that explore the human experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the key insight. The skills you build in your solo listening practice, the patience, the focus, they directly transfer to your real-world relationships.
Ah, I see. So if you train yourself to actually listen without interrupting to a 1-hour interview.
You're building the muscle of patience. You're building the muscle of sustained focus.
Then when you get home and your partner wants to tell you about their day, you're actually better equipped to listen to them.
You are more present. You've trained your brain to stay with another person's voice and their story.
Okay, this is all fantastic. We have the why, the neuroscience, we have the 4 types, now we need the how, the psychology of actually making it stick. Because I'll be honest, starting is easy. I can download a podcast right now, but keeping it going into week 3, week 4, that's where the wheels always fall off for me.
That is the universal struggle. And it's because most of us rely on motivation. We feel inspired, so we start. But motivation is just a feeling. It's like the weather, it's unreliable. You can't build a house on the assumption that it's always going to be sunny.
So you need a system, not just a feeling.
You need to understand the mechanics. And that's the habit loop.
Right. It has 3 parts.
3 parts. First, the cue. That's the trigger. Second, the routine. That's the action itself. And third, the reward. That's the positive feeling you get from it.
So where do most people go wrong with that loop?
They usually fail at the very first step. The cue, they're too vague. They say, "I'll listen more." That's not a cue, that's a wish. A cue has to be specific. When my morning alarm goes off, that's my cue. Or when I finish washing the lunch dishes, that's my cue.
So it has to be tied to an existing event. And what's the second big mistake?
The routine. We make it way too big. It's the all or nothing mindset. We say, "I'm going to listen to an hour-long economics lecture every single day from now on."
I am so guilty of this. I'm going to become an expert in Renaissance art by next month, and then by day 4, I'm completely burned out and I quit.
It's the classic trap. And that's where the philosophy of tiny habits comes in. The solution is to start, well, ridiculously small.
How small is ridiculously small?
The small feels silly, so small you can't possibly fail. Listen for just 5 minutes while your coffee brews. Listen to one song, really listen to it, while you eat your breakfast. Or play a 2-minute meditation before you open your email.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though. What's the point of 2 minutes? You're not going to learn anything substantial in 120 seconds.
Because in the beginning, the goal isn't to learn. The goal is to build the pattern. You are just trying to carve the neural pathway in your brain that says, after coffee comes listening. That's it. Consistency is infinitely more important than duration when you're starting.
You're building the bridge before you try to drive the truck across it.
That is a perfect metaphor. You're just laying the groundwork. And this leads to a really powerful psychological shift. It's about moving from outcome-based habits to identity-based habits.
Okay, what's the difference?
An outcome is, I want to finish this 30-hour audiobook. An identity is, I am a person who learns every day.
I am a listener.
Yes. When the habit becomes a part of who you see yourself as, it stops being a chore. You have to check off a list. You just do it because, well, that's who you are.
That feels like a much more powerful motivator. Okay, so we've got the philosophy down. Let's get into the toolkit, the really practical strategies. Number 1 is habit stacking.
This is my absolute favorite because it's so elegant. The formula is simple. After I current habit, I will expense new listening habit. You're literally piggybacking on a habit that's already hardwired into your brain.
So you're not trying to find extra time in your day.
No, not at all. You're just linking the new behavior to something you already do without thinking. After I brush my teeth, I will listen to a 5-minute news briefing. After I get in the car and buckle my seatbelt, I will press play on my audiobook.
It takes the decision out of it. You don't have to wonder when you'll listen. The coffee pot decides for you.
It reduces friction. And that's the goal of the second strategy too, environmental design.
This is based on the idea that our willpower is basically a myth, right? Or at least it's not very reliable.
Willpower is like a phone battery. It starts full in the morning and it drains throughout the day. You can't rely on it. So instead, you design your environment to make the right choice the easy choice.
So physically, that would mean what?
Leaving your headphones right on top of the coffee maker the night before, make them impossible to ignore. If they're tucked away in a drawer, you're adding a step, you're adding friction.
And digitally, what does environmental design look like on my phone?
It's huge. Download your episodes ahead of time. Don't let a spotty Wi-Fi connection be your excuse. Organize your podcasts into folders by mood. Work out, relax, learn. Make starting so easy that it would actually take more effort not to listen.
I like that. Now, strategy number 3 is the 2-minute rule. We touched on this, but this is really the emergency plan for lazy days, isn't it?
It's your safety net.
Yeah.
Because you will have days where you're tired, you're stressed, you're just not feeling it. The rule is you have to do it for 2 minutes. That's the deal you make with yourself.
And for that to work, you need to have those short options ready to go.
Yes, you need a playlist, a 2-minute drill playlist, a couple of short poems, a few brief comedy bits, a 2-minute guided breathing exercise, anything.
The point isn't the content. The point is maintaining the streak.
You're preserving the identity. You're still a person who listens daily.
Yeah.
You just had a short day. It prevents the all or nothing spiral where one missed day turns into a missed month.
And the final one, strategy 4, is temptation mundling. This one sounds fun.
This one is a game changer. It's a very clever psychological trick where you pair something you want to do with something you need to do.
Like eating your vegetables to get dessert.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
Let's say you absolutely hate doing the dishes, but you are completely hooked on a new thriller audiobook. The rule is you are only allowed to listen to that audiobook while you are doing the dishes.
Huh. So if I want to find out what happens next in the story, I have to go wash some plates.
You have to do the chore. And a weird thing happens. You stop dreading the chore. You actually start looking forward to it because it's your gateway to the thing you love. You start thinking, oh, good, the laundry basket is full. I can listen to my book.
And it is genuinely a life hack, turning mundane tasks into cliffhangers.
It's surprisingly powerful.
So those are the tools to get going, but we know it's not always smooth sailing. Let's talk about obstacles. One of the biggest for me is what you call decision fatigue.
The paradox of choice. It's a modern curse. You open your podcast app and you're faced with a million options. You scroll for 10 minutes trying to find the perfect thing to listen to.
And by then, my commute is half over, or I just give up and put on music I've heard 1,000 times.
We have all been there. The solution is to separate the act of finding from the act of listening.
Separate finding from listening.
Okay, think of it like meal prepping for your mind. You don't stand in front of an open fridge trying to figure out dinner when you're already starving. You plan on the weekend. Do the same for your listening.
So set aside time once a week to just build a playlist.
Exactly. Spend 30 minutes on a Sunday evening, go through your subscriptions, download the episodes that look interesting, and put them in a queue for the week. Then when it's Monday morning, you don't think. You just press play.
You become your own curator. That saves a ton of mental energy. But what about that other feeling? It's just resistance. You know the queue is there, the headphones are charged, but your brain just says, no, not today.
Resistance is totally normal. It's not a moral failing. We have two tools for it. First is the 10-minute rule. Just tell yourself, okay, I'll just listen for 10 minutes. If I still hate it after 10 minutes, I can stop. No guilt.
And what usually happens is that getting started was the hardest part, and you just keep going.
9 times out of 10, yeah. The friction is always the beginning. But if you do stop, that's okay. And that leads to the second tool. Reframe the resistance. Treat it like data.
What do you mean?
Ask yourself why you're resisting. Is the topic too heavy for your mood? Are you just bored with that subject right now? Maybe your brain doesn't want to lecture on economics today. Maybe it needs a comedy podcast.
So don't just try to power through it. Be flexible.
Rigidity is the enemy of long-term habits. Listen to your brain. If it needs a break, give it one. Switch to entertainment. Switch to contemplative music.
Which brings us to the idea of contextual listening. The right audio for the right moment.
Absolutely. For a professional, that commute is gold. You can turn a traffic jam into a mobile university. But when you're back in your desk trying to do deep, focused work...
Yeah, you can't listen to people talking then.
No. That's when you switch to instrumental music or even just white noise. For parents, shared listening can be a great tool. An audio story in the car that everyone listens to together.
It becomes a shared experience you can talk about later.
Right. And for a student, it's about reinforcement. If you learned about World War II in class, listen to a podcast with a first-hand account from a soldier. It makes the history come alive.
Okay, so let's say we've done all this. The habit is established. We're curating. We're context switching. For the people who are ready to really take this to the next level, let's talk about some advanced techniques. How do we go from just being a consumer to a master practitioner?
The first and biggest step is moving from passive to active listening. Most of the time, we listen passively. The sound just washes over us. Active listening is about engaging with it.
Okay, give me some practical ways to do that.
The simplest is note-taking. Even if you just type one key idea or a cool quote into your phone, the physical act signals to your brain, pay attention, this matters. Another powerful one is the pause practice.
The pause practice.
When you hear a really interesting or challenging idea, just hit pause. Stop the audio and just sit with that idea for 30 seconds. Try to rephrase it in your own words. Let it actually sink in.
Instead of just letting the next sentence steamroll over it.
Yeah.
That takes discipline.
It does, but it makes a world of difference for retention. And then there's simple repetition. We'll rewatch our favorite movie 10 times, but we almost never re-listen to a podcast episode.
That's so true.
If you listen to a really dense, valuable deep dive a second or third time, you will pick up on nuances you completely missed the first time around. You're peeling back the layers.
Now, you mentioned a term that sounds a bit academic, but the idea is really cool. Interleaving.
Right. Interleaving comes from the science of learning. And it's pretty simple, really. It just means you should mix up your topics instead of blocking them all together.
So the opposite of binge watching. Don't listen to 10 episodes about productivity in a row.
Please don't. You'll just get sick of it. The better approach is to alternate. Listen to one episode on productivity, then maybe one on ancient history, then a chapter of a fiction novel.
But wouldn't that get confusing? It feels like it would dilute the learning.
It seems that way, but the research shows the opposite is true. It forces your brain to work a little harder, to switch contexts, and more importantly, it promotes cross-pollination of ideas.
Ah, so you start making connections between the ancient history and the productivity principles.
That's where true insight comes from. That's the source of those aha moments. And to manage this, we suggest a simple rule, the 70-30 curriculum.
Okay, break that down.
70% of your listening should be structured. These are the topics you are intentionally trying to master, your core curriculum.
And the other 30%?
That's for play, spontaneous exploration, the wild card slot. Follow your curiosity. Listen to a podcast about beekeeping or the history of a font. It's this randomness that prevents burnout and often leads to the most surprising discoveries.
I love that. Okay, so let's zoom all the way out. Someone commits to this. They build the habit. They use the advanced techniques. They do it for a year. What happens? What are the real long-term ripple effects?
I think the transformation is profound. The first is what we call knowledge compounding. It's like compound interest for your brain. The more you know, the more connections you can make, and the faster you can learn new things. You just become a more interesting, well-rounded person.
You're the person at the dinner party who can connect to seemingly unrelated ideas in a fascinating way.
Yes, but even deeper than that is the growth in your emotional intelligence. By listening to so many different human stories, different perspectives, you can't help but develop a richer sense of empathy. You get better at sitting with nuance and discomfort.
You become less reactive, maybe more understanding.
And finally, and I think this is so important today, it can actually reduce feelings of loneliness. Even when you're listening alone, you're connecting to a shared human experience. And all the skills you've built, patience, focus, make you a better, more present listener for the actual people in your life.
So your friends, your family, your partner, they get a better version of you.
That's the ultimate reward. It's not just about what you know, it's about who you become.
Who you become. That's the perfect way to frame it. Well, we have covered a ton of ground today. We went from the crisis of attention all the way through the neuroscience, the habit formation, and these advanced techniques.
It is a whole system. But the most important thing to remember is that it all starts with one ridiculously small step.
And I think that's the final thought I want to leave everyone with. The world is constantly speaking to you. There's so much beauty and wisdom and incredible stories out there available 24/7. All you have to do is decide to press play. Your future self, that more knowledgeable, more centered, more connected person is going to be so grateful that you started today.
Beautifully put.
Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.
Hello. Welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is How to Learn English Without Stress.
And, looking at how people actually learn languages today, this might be the single most critical topic we could possibly cover.
Really?
The most critical? I think so. Because the method, it just doesn't matter if the mindset is broken. You can have the best textbooks, the most expensive tutors, the fanciest apps, but if your brain is locked up, nothing gets in.
Right. And locked up is exactly how it feels for so many people.
Yeah.
I want to start with this image that really stuck with me while we were prepping for this deep dive. It's a metaphor that I think just captures the experience perfectly.
Okay, might make.
For millions of people, learning English feels like carrying a massive lead-filled backpack up a steep, muddy mountain.
Oof. That is a painful image.
It is, isn't it? It's exhausting. It's scary. Every single step is a struggle. The straps are digging into your shoulders, and you constantly feel like you're about to slip and fall all the way back to the bottom. It's this grueling physical and emotional weight.
That's visceral, and unfortunately, it's entirely accurate for I'd say the vast majority of learners. They associate English with pressure, with judgment.
Yes.
But the reality, and this is what we're going to explore today, is that learning a language shouldn't feel like a forced march up Everest. It should feel like a pleasant walk.
A walk? Okay, that sounds a little optimistic for someone who breaks into a cold sweat over phrasal verbs.
No, bear with me here. Yes, a walk. Just think about the difference for a second. When you go for a walk, sure, sometimes the terrain is a little hilly, sometimes you might breathe a little harder.
Okay, yeah.
But mostly, it's stimulating. You're moving forward. You're seeing new things. And the most important part is that it is sustainable. You can walk for years. You can't carry a 100-pound backpack for years without collapsing.
And that's exactly what we see, isn't it? People collapsing, quitting.
We do. We see burnout. We see people deciding that they just don't have the gene for languages, when in reality, they were just crushed by the weight of that backpack.
That is the perfect setup for this. Because so many listeners right now are nodding their heads. We see this problem state everywhere. The stressed learner, You know the symptoms, that anxiety before a class, the crippling self-doubt, that paralyzing fear that you're going to mess up a single grammar rule. It's almost like a physical ailment.
And that feeling of being too slow, that one's a killer.
Oh, it's the worst.
That thought that I'm not talented enough or everyone else is getting this faster than me, it creates this loop of negativity that actually reinforces the failure.
Yeah.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So let's just lay it all out on the table right here at the start. What's our core premise? What is the antidote to the heavy backpack?
The premise is simple, but for some people, it's pretty radical. You do not need stress to learn well. In fact, stress isn't a fuel, it's a brake.
A break.
Stress actively, physically, makes learning slower and significantly harder.
I love that. Stress is a break. I think so many of us were raised with this idea that if you aren't suffering, you aren't learning. You know, that stress proves you're working hard.
That is a cultural hangover that we really need to let go of. So our mission in this deep dive isn't to give you a quick fix or some magic pill to learn English in 3 days.
Which, by the way, does not exist.
It definitely does not. No. We're talking about a lifestyle change. We're trying to shift from survival mode, where you're just trying to get through the day without humiliating yourself, to curiosity mode.
Survival mode to curiosity mode.
And that shift changes everything. The moment you move from, I have to do this or I fail, to, I wonder how this works, the actual chemistry in your brain changes.
Okay, let's unpack the science of this, because I think people assume stress is just an emotion, like, oh, I'm just nervous. But so much more than that, isn't it? It's physiological.
It is entirely physiological. This is where it gets really fascinating. When you're stressed, your brain views the situation as a threat. It enters what we call survival mode, or the fight or flight response.
Right.
Now, biologically, that's great if you're, running away from a lion on the savannah.
But of course, if I'm running from a predator, I do not need to know how to conjugate irregular verbs. I just need to run fast.
Correct. When you're running from that lion, your body shuts down all non-essential functions to divert energy to your muscles. And guess what the brain considers non-essential in that moment?
Let me guess.
Language.
Complex language processing, memory retrieval, creative thinking, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for higher order thinking and language. It essentially goes offline.
So literally, stress creates a biological brain block. It's not just a feeling, it's a physical barricade. That is spot on. Stress floods your system with cortisol. And high cortisol levels, they degrade memory function and they weaken concentration. So when you feel that panic during a conversation, you are physically blocking the neural pathways you need to access the English you already know.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It's not that you've forgotten it, it's that the bridge is out.
This explains the I know it, but I can't say it phenomenon. I hear this all the time. Someone will say, I was alone in my room listening to a podcast and I understood everything. I knew the words, but then I went to a job interview or I tried to talk to a waiter and poof, blank mind.
And then what happens? They beat themselves up. They say, I'm so bad at English. But that is a false diagnosis. You aren't bad at English. You are stressed. The stress has blocked access to your knowledge banks.
So it's locked away.
Think of it like this. You have a library full of books in your head, but because of the stress, the library door is locked and the building is on fire. You can't sit down and read a book when you're choking on smoke.
That is such a relief to hear, honestly, for so many people listening, I hope. It's not a lack of talent. It's a physiological response to a perceived threat. We're treating a waiter like a lion.
Which means we have to reframe the goal entirely. The objective can't be, how can I cram more words into my head faster? The objective must be, how can I learn in a relaxed, sustainable way? Because here's the great paradox. Relaxation is the key to speed.
If you relax, you unlock the door to the library.
That's the mechanism. The brain learns best when it feels safe. There's this concept in linguistics, it's sometimes called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Imagine a wall that goes up and down inside your head. When anxiety is high, that filter, that wall is up, and any input it bounces off. Nothing gets in. When anxiety is low, the filter is down and the language flows in and sticks.
So to get to that safe place where the filter is down, we have to talk about mindset. We need to do some demolition work on how we view English, because most of us are carrying some serious baggage from school.
We absolutely need to dismantle the school subject fallacy.
Oh, this is a big one. I think most of us grew up treating English exactly like math or physics or history. It was a class. You had a textbook. You had homework. You had a test on Friday.
And that is a catastrophe for language learning. Think about how you study history. You memorize dates, you memorize facts, you take a test, and you pass or fail. It's linear. It's about completion.
Right. I must finish the textbook. I
Yeah.
must learn this chapter.
Yes, and once you pass the test on the French Revolution, you stop studying the French Revolution. You're done.
Exactly. I must memorize these rules. I must get an A. It's so transactional. I give you memorization, you give me a grade.
But English is not a subject to be studied. It is a living language to be experienced. You cannot finish English. You can't solve English like a math equation.
There's no point where you get a certificate that says, congratulations, you are done with English.
Never. Even native speakers are still learning new words and idioms every single day.
So how should we look at it? If it's not a subject like math, what's a better analogy?
Treat it like music, or like a sport, or like cooking. It's a skill you practice and live with, not a list of facts you memorize. You don't study piano by reading a book about keys for 5 years and then suddenly play a concerto.
No, you play the piano. You make noise. You hit the wrong notes.
You play a song slowly and badly before you play it quickly and beautifully. It's a process.
That shift from chore list to daily habit is huge. But there's a trap inside that mindset too, which is perfectionism. I must be perfect. I must speak like a native. I'm too old to make mistakes.
Those thoughts are toxic. They are the backpack we talked about earlier. Let's look at the ultimate language learners, children. How does a child learn their first language? Do they study a grammar book for 3 years before they say, Mama?
No, of course not. They just babble. They make weird noises. They point at things and say the wrong word. My nephew used to call every animal a doggy.
Right, and they say goed instead of went. But do they feel shame? Does a 2-year-old think, oh no, I used the wrong past tense verb. I am a failure. I will never speak again.
Not at all. They just keep going. They want the cookie, so they find a way to ask for the cookie. If they mess up, they just try again.
They learn by listening, copying, trying, failing, and trying again, without shame. And your brain, even as an adult, it still learns most effectively that way. But we add this layer of adult ego and perfectionism that just suffocates the process.
We're so afraid of looking foolish.
Exactly. We're so afraid of looking foolish that we stop the very process required to learn. We prioritize looking smart over actually learning.
So we need new mantras. We literally need to reprogram the internal dialogue. Because that little voice in our head is usually pretty mean.
We do. So instead of, I must be perfect, you tell yourself, I am learning step by step.
And instead of, I'm afraid of mistakes.
You say, mistakes mean progress. And that isn't just a motivational poster slogan. A mistake is literally a data point. It's feedback. If you aren't making mistakes, you aren't pushing the boundaries of what you know.
You're just staying in the safe zone.
And learning happens outside the safe zone.
And what about, I'm too slow, which is my personal demon?
You replace that with, I am building a strong foundation. You know, bamboo grows underground for years, building its root system before it shoots up 60 feet in a few weeks. Language is similar. You might not see the growth on the surface, but the root system is developing.
I love that. Okay, so we're chilling out, we're dropping the backpack, but we still need to actually learn the language. We can't just meditate our way to fluency. We need contact with the language.
True. You need exposure. You need the raw material.
And one of the common excuses, or maybe legitimate barriers, is I don't live in an English-speaking country. I can't immerse myself.
Yes, the geography excuse.
Right. If I just lived in London, I'd be fluent, but I live in Tokyo or Brazil or Berlin.
That is a myth. It's a comforting myth because it puts the responsibility on geography rather than on your own actions. But the idea that you need a plane ticket to learn is just false. You do not need to be in London or New York.
So what do you need?
You need to build a daily environment right where you are.
The immersion without the plane ticket concept.
That's the one. And I really want to challenge the idea that you need to study for 5 hours a day. Most people think if I don't have 4 hours to sit at a desk, why bother? But that is completely the wrong approach.
It's all or nothing for them.
Right. But it's about surrounding yourself naturally. Repeated, relaxed exposure. We call this micro-immersion.
Okay, let's get tactical here. What does stress-free immersion look like for a busy person who has a job, maybe kids, a life? How do we hack our environment?
It looks like using the dead time in your day. Listen to a podcast while you are walking the dog. And I don't mean studying it with a notepad.
Right, not like homework.
Just listening. Let the sounds wash over you.
What about watching YouTube videos while you're eating lunch?
Perfect. Read a short article, maybe 3 paragraphs, before you go to sleep. And here's a very, very actionable tip that creates a constant trigger. Change your phone's language settings to English.
Ooh, that's a good one. It forces you to navigate the interface in English every single time you pick it up.
It does, and yes, for the first 2 days, it is annoying. You might struggle to find the settings menu or figure out how to change your brightness. But suddenly, words like settings, display, notifications, and privacy become second nature. You learn them without trying.
It's forcing your brain to operate in English for utility, not for study. You need to use the phone, so you have to use the language.
That's the key. And follow English pages on social media. If you're going to scroll through Instagram or TikTok anyway, and let's be honest, we all do.
We all do.
Make sure that every third or fourth post is in English. Let the learning interrupt your scrolling.
That is so smart. It turns a bad habit into a learning opportunity. Instead of just doom scrolling, you're getting these little micro doses of vocabulary.
And this connects to a core rule of language acquisition. Input first, output later.
Break that down for us. Because traditional schooling usually does the exact opposite. It makes you speak immediately. Class, repeat after me.
And that's a huge source of stress. Many people try to force speech too early. They want to output before they have enough input. Go back to the child analogy again. A baby listens for months, literally thousands of hours of input before they start forming sentences.
Right. They understand way before they can produce.
This is often called the silent period. It's natural.
So we should be soaking it in, like a sponge.
Yes. Aim for 30 to 60 minutes of listening or reading daily. It sounds like a lot, but if you do it while commuting or doing chores, it fits. This lets the brain recognize patterns naturally without the pressure of studying. You're just feeding your brain data so it can build its own model of the language. You can't build a house without bricks. Input is the bricks.
But, and this is a big but, if I'm listening to something boring, I'm going to tune out. I'm going to quit. If I force myself to listen to a lecture on 18th century economics, my brain is just going to shut down.
That brings us to maybe the most important practical point, the enjoyment factor. This is non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable.
If you hate the news, for the love of everything, do not watch the news in English.
Please. There is nothing worse than struggling through a political debate in a second language if you don't even like politics in your first language.
Yeah.
It's just torture.
It is. It's double the pain. If you hate textbooks, put them away. The equation is so simple. Enjoyment equals consistency, and consistency equals progress.
It's a good formula.
If the method is perfect academically, if it's the most scientifically backed textbook in the world, but it bores you to tears, you will quit in 2 weeks. And that is a failed method.
But an imperfect method like watching silly cat videos or cooking shows that you actually do every single day for a year.
That is powerful. That is how you win. Because you show up. You actually do the work because it doesn't feel like work.
So it's all about tailoring the experience. If you love stories, read stories. If you're a foodie, watch Gordon Ramsay yelling at people in English.
Well, maybe someone a bit calmer than Ramsay for stress reduction, but yes, the principle is sound. And this leads to a profound shift. Don't learn English just to learn English. Use English as a tool to learn something else.
Oh, I see. So the focus isn't on the language itself. The focus is on the content.
Precisely. Learn history via English documentaries. Learn business strategy through English articles. When English is the bridge to information you actually want, the stress of the language itself just it tends to disappear. You're so focused on understanding the recipe or the story that you forget to be anxious about the grammar.
You're basically tricking your brain into learning. You're distracting the guard at the door.
You're engaging your brain's natural curiosity, which overrides the fear center. The brain loves to solve problems. How do I bake this cake is a problem the brain wants to solve.
Yeah.
What is the past participle of to be is not a problem the brain cares about naturally.
Speaking of fear, we have to talk about the monster in the room. Speaking.
The number one obstacle, the final boss.
It really is. Yeah. And before we even open our mouths, there's this mental hurdle I call the comparison thief. And social media makes this so much worse. You see someone on Instagram posting, "I learned English in 3 months," and they sound absolutely perfect.
And you immediately compare your chapter 1 to their chapter 20. It creates a completely distorted reality.
It really does. It's so discouraging.
I don't see the outtakes. You don't see the years of practice they did before they started that account. You don't see the thousands of mistakes they made. You are on your own path. You are not behind because there is no schedule. There is no deadline on learning a language.
But that fear of judgment is so real.
Yeah.
The fear of embarrassment. What if I sound stupid? What if my accent is too thick?
Here's the secret that every polyglot knows. Fluency comes from using imperfect English many times. It does not come from waiting until you are perfect to speak.
Wait, can you say that again? That's really important.
You become ready by speaking, not before. You cannot study your way to speaking readiness in silence. You have to open your mouth and stumble. It is messy. It's supposed to be messy.
So how do we do that without having a full-blown panic attack? What are some low-stress speaking techniques? Because just jumping into a conversation with a native speaker might be too much for some people right away.
Start where there is zero judgment. Speak to yourself alone.
I do this. I have full conversations with myself in the shower. I win every argument I've ever had in the shower.
It is incredibly effective. Describe your day out loud while you're doing chores. Okay, now I am washing the dishes. The water is warm. I need to find the soap. It sounds silly, but it connects your brain to your mouth muscles. You're bridging that gap between thought and articulation without any social pressure.
Recording your voice is another good one, right?
Yes, though that can be painful at first. Most people hate the sound of their own voice, but hearing your progress over a few months is incredibly motivating. And also, talk to AI tools. There are so many apps now where you can just speak to a bot.
And a bot can't judge you.
A bot does not roll its eyes if you use the wrong preposition. It just responds.
That safety is key. It's like a simulator. Pilots practice in flight simulators before they fly real planes. Speaking to a bot is your flight simulator for conversation.
That's a great analogy. And when we do make mistakes, because we will, even after years, we have to reframe what they mean.
Back to the idea of mistakes as data.
They are not failures. They are feedback. If you say a sentence and someone looks confused, that is just data telling you, okay, that structure didn't work. Let me try another one.
I made a mistake should translate to my brain is learning.
Yes. If you aren't making mistakes, you aren't using the language enough. You're playing it too safe. You're just staying in the shallow end of the pool. To learn to swim, you have to go where you can't touch the bottom.
So this brings us to the logistics of it all. We have the mindset, we have the immersion strategy, we're willing to make mistakes. But how do we fit this into a chaotic life? We talked about the lifestyle change, but what does a gentle routine actually look like?
It means replacing cramming with sipping. You don't chug a gallon of water once a week and hope for the best. You sip water all day to stay hydrated. Learning is the same.
I like that analogy. Binge learning on a Sunday usually leads to forgetting everything by Tuesday anyway.
Exactly. So a sustainable schedule might look like this. In the morning, 10 minutes of reading while you have your coffee. Just 10 minutes. Read a blog post, a news snippet, a few pages of a book.
That's doable. Everyone has 10 minutes, or they can wake up 10 minutes earlier.
Then in the afternoon, maybe on your commute or while walking, 20 minutes of listening. A podcast, an audiobook, or even music if you're actively listening to the lyrics.
Easy. You're doing the commute anyway. Might as well use it.
And then in the evening, 10 minutes of speaking, maybe to yourself, like we said, or writing a short journal entry. Today I went to work and I felt tired. Keep it simple. That's it.
So that's 40 minutes a day. But it's broken up so it never feels like a burden. It doesn't feel like homework.
And those small daily actions will always beat big, irregular, stressful efforts. The brain loves patterns. It loves rhythm. If you do that for a year, you will have hundreds of hours of exposure. That beats a 2-week intensive course that just burns you out.
What about grammar? Because for so many people, grammar is the source of all the stress, the endless rules, the exceptions to the rules, the past perfect continuous nightmare.
Stop memorizing 100 rules. Just stop.
Music to my ears. But then, how do we learn to be correct without the rules?
Grammar should support communication, not control it. The goal is to be understood, not to pass a syntax exam. You learn patterns from real sentences. You notice how native speakers actually talk. We call this noticing.
Can you give an example of noticing?
Sure. So instead of memorizing the rule for the present perfect tense, subject plus have, has plus past participle, you just listen. You hear people say, I've been there, or have you seen it? Over and over again. Your brain starts to map that pattern to the meaning of experience in the past. You acquire the grammar naturally, the same way a child does.
It's like learning a song. You don't memorize the sheet music first. You hear the melody and you hum along until you get it right.
That's a perfect way to put it. Grammar rules are useful for checking your work later, but they shouldn't be the driver. They are the map, not the terrain. You learn by walking the terrain.
You know, it feels like what we're really talking about here, underlying all of this, is patience.
We absolutely are. We have to play the long game. We have to shift the timeline from weeks to years.
Oof, years. That sounds daunting to some people. I don't want to wait years to be fluent.
But it's actually liberating. If you think you have to be fluent in 30 days, you will be stressed out of your mind. You will fail. But if you accept that this is a long, friendly journey that will last for years, the pressure just vanishes.
Definitely.
You can enjoy today's walk.
Yeah.
You stop looking at the summit of the mountain and you start looking at the flowers on the side of the path.
That is the key difference. The 30-day challenge mentality is a recipe for burnout. It sells courses, but it doesn't produce speakers.
You don't learn by being smart. You learn by being patient and persistent.
So as we wrap this up, what does this all mean? Let's bring it all together for everyone listening.
It means your brain is actually on your side. It wants to learn. It is designed to learn language. That is one of the primary things human brains do. But it needs safety. It needs repetition. And it needs you to stop hitting it with the stick of pressure.
Simplicity wins. Simple words, clear ideas, and daily contact.
Yes, you do not need big words to be fluent. Fluency is communicating easily and not sounding like a walking thesaurus. Don't try to impress people. Try to connect with people.
I want to leave our listeners with this one final thought. If you're listening to this and you're feeling like you are late to the party, or that you failed because you stopped studying for a few months,
you are not late. You are not failing. You are building a new part of yourself. That is a biological process. It takes time. A tree doesn't apologize for growing slowly. It just grows.
So relax, breathe, enjoy the journey. The backpack is off. Just enjoy the walk.
And look around at the view while you're walking. It's supposed to be fun.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. If you found this helpful, if you felt that heavy backpack get a little lighter today, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more deep dives. It really helps us keep these conversations going.
And it keeps us exploring new topics to help you on your journey.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Goodbye.
See you next time. Hello. Welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is Think in English, Don't Translate.
It sounds like, the simplest instruction in the world, doesn't it? Just think in the language.
Right.
It's the advice every teacher gives. It's probably printed on the first page of every textbook. But, for anyone who's actually been in the trenches learning a second language, you know that flipping that switch is infinitely more complicated than it sounds.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like someone telling you to just relax while you're, falling out of an airplane.
Yeah.
I think we really need to start by properly setting the scene here, because this is a pain point that literally every single language learner has felt deep in their bones. You know the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a conversation, maybe you're just ordering a coffee or trying to chat with a colleague, before a meeting starts, and someone asks you a simple question, and you freeze.
The deer in the headlights moment. The brain lock.
That's it. You know exactly what you want to say. In your native language, the thought is sitting right there, fully formed, articulate, maybe even funny. But then your brain just goes into this frantic panic mode archive search. You're hunting for the matching words in English. You're trying to arrange them. You're double-checking grammar rules you learned in high school. And by the time you actually open your mouth,
the moment has passed.
It's gone.
The rhythm is broken. Or, and this is maybe even worse, you stumble through it awkwardly, using a word that's technically correct, but sounds completely unnatural, and the person just looks at you with that polite confusion.
Right. And it feels terrible. It feels like your brain just crashed. It is such a confidence killer. You walk away thinking, I know the answer. Why couldn't I say it?
That is the universal struggle. It really is. It's the defining frustration of the intermediate learner. But what we found in the deep dive for today is that this isn't just a matter of you needing to, study more vocabulary lists. No. It isn't because you aren't smart enough or don't have an aptitude for languages. It's a structural issue. It's about how your brain is processing the information. If you're translating, you are effectively building a massive barrier to your own fluency.
So let's unpack this, because the material describes this process, the translation process, as the scenic route of the brain, which sounds lovely if you're on a Sunday drive.
If you're looking at the hills, sure.
But not when you're trying to make a joke at a dinner party and you need the timing to be instant.
Indisputably, it is the most inefficient, circuitous way to communicate. When you rely on translation, you aren't just swapping one word for another. You are running a massive 7-step background process in your brain for every single sentence.
7 steps. That seems high. I think most people assume it's just hear word, translate word, speak word, 3 steps.
Maybe 4 if you count breathing.
Right.
I wish it were that streamlined, but let's break down what's actually happening under the hood. So, step 1, you receive the English input, you hear the sounds. Step 2, you have to convert that input into your native language just to understand it. You aren't understanding the English, you're understanding the translation of the English.
Okay, so right off the bat, you're adding a whole extra layer of processing.
A huge one. Then, step 3, you process the actual meaning, the emotional or logical content, but you're doing that processing in your native tongue. You are thinking about the answer in Spanish or Japanese or German.
Okay, so you're already 3 steps deep, you're burning energy, and you haven't even started thinking about your reply yet.
Not at all. You're just at the comprehension stage.
Yeah.
Now comes the output. Step 4, you formulate your response. But again, you draft it in your native language. You build the sentence perfectly in your head in your mother tongue. Step 5, you then have to translate that draft back into English.
And this is where the wheels usually fall off, I'm guessing?
Often, yes. Because step 6, and this is the killer, you mentally check the grammar and vocabulary. You're trying to make sure you didn't mess up the structure. You're auditioning the sentence in your mind, scanning for errors.
Oh, wow.
And finally, step 7, you speak.
That is exhausting just to hear you list it out. It's no wonder people hesitate.
It is. Think about it like this. It's like trying to run, high-end video editing software on a computer from 1995.
Yeah.
It just eats up all your RAM. The processor is overheating. The fan is spinning like crazy. That's why learners feel physically drained after speaking English for just 30 minutes. It isn't the language itself that's tiring. It's that massive processing load.
It's the spinning wheel of death for the human brain. You're buffering.
It's like the perfect visual. You're buffering in real-time conversation.
So the mission for this deep dive isn't just learn more words. It's stop the 7-step program. We want to rewire the brain to bypass that native language loop entirely.
That is the crux of it. We want to streamline the architecture. We want to go from input to meaning and then meaning to output. No detour through the native tongue. It's all about direct connection.
But why is that detour so dangerous? I mean, apart from it being slow, we get that it causes lag. Why does it actually lead to bad English? Because the research suggests that translation creates this illusion of understanding. You think you know what you're saying, but you're actually saying something slightly off.
This is where it gets really fascinating. We tend to think of languages as just codes, like a cipher, where A equals B, dog equals Perot or Hund.
Sure, a simple swap.
We think if we just swap the labels, the reality underneath is the same. But languages do not map one-to-one. They carve up reality differently.
I love the example in the research about the word home. It seems so simple. Everyone has a word for where they live.
Yes, but the concept isn't identical. In English, home is a very heavy word. It implies comfort, belonging, home sweet home. It's emotional.
It's where the heart is.
Absolutely. You can say, I'm going home, and it feels warm. But in many other languages, the direct translation might just mean dwelling or house, the physical structure.
Right. So if I translate the word from my native language, which just means the building where I sleep, and I use that to mean home, I'm missing the vibe.
You get the logical location, but you lose the feeling. You're stripping the color out of the language without even realizing it. You're speaking in black and white while everyone else is in technicolor.
Indeed. And it gets even messier with things like phrasal verbs, like take run into. I ran into an old friend.
Oh, this is a nightmare for translators.
If I'm translating that literally word for word, I'm imagining a physical collision. Like I was jogging down the street and bam, I hit my friend and knocked them over.
Spot on. Your brain has to conjure that image first because that is what the words mean literally. Then your brain has to realize it's ridiculous, discard it, and then search for the metaphorical meaning of meeting unexpectedly.
And that takes time.
It takes milliseconds, sure, but those milliseconds add up to that lag we talked about. You're constantly fighting your own mental imagery.
And idioms. Raining cats and dogs.
A classic. A literal translator sees falling pets. A direct thinker just sees a heavy downpour. The mental imagery is completely different. If you're translating, you are essentially hallucinating weird images all day long and then correcting them. It's a chaotic way to think.
It's almost like you're trying to build a building using the wrong blueprints. You have the bricks, but the design is for a completely different climate.
That is a perfect analogy. The research actually touches on this concept of structural damage. When you think in your native language, you are trying to force English into the architectural blueprint of your mother tongue. You're just importing errors.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like in practice? Because I think people do this without even knowing they are doing it.
Sure. A very common one is the concept of age. In English, we use the verb to be. I am 25. The structure defines who you are.
It's a state of being.
Right. But in Spanish or French, the structure is to have. I have 25 years. It's a possession. So if you form the thought in Spanish and translate it, you end up saying, I have 25 years in English.
Which is understandable. If someone said that to me, I'd know what they meant. But it marks them immediately as a non-native speaker.
Instantly. It's structurally wrong. You are forcing a square peg into a round hole.
Or the German sentence structure. Right. Pushing the verb all the way to the end.
Indisputably. In German, you might have a sentence that literally translates to, I have the ball to the man thrown. The action is just hanging off a cliff at the end. If you try to map that onto English, which wants the verb right after the subject, you end up with a mess.
It's like building that Japanese house with Italian plans again. The foundation just doesn't match the walls.
It fundamentally doesn't work.
And beyond the grammar, there's a massive cognitive toll. We briefly mentioned the lag, but think about humor. This is something I hear from listeners all the time. They feel like they lose their personality.
Oh, this is the worst part. Being the boring person in the group because you can't joke fast enough.
Humor is all about timing, right?
Humor relies entirely on timing and wordplay. By the time you translate the joke, understand the pun, translate your witty comeback, and then check the grammar, the conversation has moved on 3 topics.
And you just sit there in silence.
You sit there in silence. You feel less like yourself. You feel stripped of your wit.
That hits home for so many people. It's like you have a cool, smart, charismatic personality in your native language and a childlike, quiet, shy personality in English.
Which is incredibly frustrating for intelligent adults. You feel trapped inside your own head. But the good news is, this isn't a character flaw. You aren't boring. It's a neurological bottleneck. You are literally just blocked by the traffic of translation.
Let's get into that, the neuroscience. Because this deep dive actually looked at what is happening physically inside the brain during this process. This isn't just theory. We can actually see it on screens.
Right. Using fMRI scans, they looked at proficient bilinguals versus learners who translate. And the difference is stark. When a proficient bilingual speaks, the brain looks very similar to a native speaker's brain. The language centers, Broca's area, Wernicke's area, they light up. Simple, efficient.
It's a clean signal.
A very clean signal. Now you look at the translators, the ones doing the 7-step program. Their brains are lighting up like a Christmas tree, but in all the wrong places.
What are they activating?
They're activating regions associated with cognitive control and working memory places like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Essentially, their brain is panicking. It's problem solving, not speaking. It's working twice as hard to achieve half the result.
It's high effort, low efficiency. It's like sprinting just to stay in the same place.
Oh, that's it. And there's also the concept of switching costs. Every time you toggle between your native language and English, there is a measurable drop in accuracy and speed. You're burning glucose just flipping that switch back and forth.
It's like paying a toll every time you want to say a sentence.
It is. And eventually, you run out of change.
So the goal is to create a separate neural pathway, a highway just for English, so we don't have to route all the traffic through the downtown of our native language.
I love that visualization. Yes. And the brain is plastic. That's the most important takeaway here. It rewires itself based on usage. If you stop using the old road, the translation road, and you force the traffic onto the new road gets paved. It becomes faster, becomes the default.
Okay, so we know why we need to do it. It saves energy, it improves accuracy, and it lets us actually be funny again. But before we get to the tactics, the how, we have to talk about the mindset shift. Because the research highlights that most people don't translate because they have to. They translate because they are afraid not to.
That is a profound insight. It starts with the idea of functional versus perfect understanding.
Right, the fear of missing a single word. I think we're all guilty of this. You hear a sentence with 10 words, you know 9 of them, but you panic over the one you don't know.
Learners are often perfectionists. They want the dictionary definition of every single word in a sentence. They treat a conversation like a math problem where every variable must be solved. But here's the truth. Native speakers don't know every word.
Wait, really? We kind of assume native speakers had the entire dictionary downloaded into their brains?
Of course not. If I read a complex technical manual or a medical journal or even a dense novel from the 1800s, there are words I don't know, maybe archaic adjectives or specific jargon, but I don't stop and translate them. I don't panic.
So what do?
I get the gist. I follow the plot. That is functional understanding. You need to be okay with ambiguity. If you understand the idea, you understand the language.
That is surprisingly comforting. So if I'm reading a book in English, I don't need to stop and look up every single adjective.
Please don't. It kills the flow. If you understand the story, keep going. Your brain will fill in the gaps. That is actually how you learn new words from context, by seeing them in the wild, not by looking them up.
Then there's truth number 2. Mistakes are necessary data.
This is the hardest one for people to accept. Mental translation feels like a safety net. It feels safe because you can double-check your sentence before you say it. Taking away that safety net feels incredibly risky.
You feel naked. You're just blurting things out without the quality assurance check.
But you have to. Research shows that learners who take risks and make mistakes learn significantly faster. Every time you make a mistake and get corrected, or even correct yourself, your brain updates its algorithm.
It's like machine